The silver dollar caught the last light of day as it spun through the air, landing with a soft thud in the dust at Nora Redmond's feet. She didn't bend to pick it up. Pride was sometimes all a widow had left, and at 34, Nora had cultivated plenty of it alongside the premature gray that now covered her once auburn hair. "Your horse needs water, madam," came a deep voice from behind her. "And with respect, you look like you could use some rest yourself." April 1878 had brought unseasonable heat to the Colorado Territory, and Nora had been traveling since dawn, her wagon wheels cutting tracks through the unforgiving landscape. The man who had spoken was tall, sun-browned, with eyes the color of the turquoise stones the local Indians traded. He wore a weathered Stetson pulled low, but not low enough to hide the kindness in those eyes. "I don't take charity," Nora replied, tugging at the faded blue scarf that covered her hair. It had been 3 years since the influenza took her husband and their son within days of each other. 3 years of working her small homestead alone, fighting back the wilderness and the creditors with equal determination. The cowboy dismounted, his movements fluid and practiced. "Not offering charity, madam, just water from my well and a fair trade." He gestured to the baskets of herbs and remedies in her wagon. "My foreman has a bad case of poison oak. I'd pay good money for something to ease his suffering." Nora hesitated. Her supplies of medicinal herbs were her livelihood, gathered from the hills around her cabin and sold to folks between Colorado Springs and Denver. But her horse was indeed thirsty, and her own parched throat reminded her that her canteen had run dry miles back. "Eli Xavier," the man said, extending his hand. "Most folks call me Eli. My ranch is just over that rise." "Nora Redmond," she replied, taking his hand briefly. His palm was calloused but warm. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Redmond. Now about that remedy." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the landscape in gold and crimson, Nora found herself seated at Elijah Xavier's kitchen table, watching as his cook, an elderly Mexican woman named Carmen, prepared a hearty stew. The ranch house was modest but solid, built of thick timber with a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. Nora had mixed a salve for the foreman's poison oak, combining which hazel, plantain, and grindelia she'd harvested herself. Eli had paid her generously, more than the remedy was worth, but she'd been too tired to argue. "You have quite a knowledge of plants," Eli remarked, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Did your husband teach you that?" Nora's fingers tightened around the cup. "No. My grandmother was known as a healer back in Pennsylvania. I learned from her before we came west." Eli nodded, his eyes lingering on the scarf covering her hair. "Your journey must have been difficult, coming all this way." "Life is difficult," she replied simply. "The journey is just part of it." Carmen placed bowls of stew before them, the rich aroma filling the kitchen. Nora realized how hungry she was, how long it had been since she'd shared a meal with anyone besides herself. "You live alone now?" Eli asked, breaking a piece of cornbread. "I manage my land." 20 acres left of South Creek. Nora tasted the stew, savoring the flavors. "Your cook is talented, Carmen is a blessing. Been with me since I started this place 5 years ago." He studied her face. 20 acres is a lot for one person to handle." Nora set down her spoon, suddenly defensive. "I manage just fine, Mr. Xavier." "Eli," he corrected gently. "And I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. It's just admirable, is all." The kitchen fell silent except for the crackling of the fire and the distant sounds of cattle lowing in the night. Nora felt Eli's eyes on her, curious but not intrusive. It had been so long since a man had looked at her with interest rather than pity. "You're welcome to stay the night," Eli said after a while. "The bunkhouse has an extra room, clean sheets private. You can head back at first light if you prefer." Nora considered his offer. The thought of traveling back in darkness was unappealing and her horse needed proper rest. "Thank you, I accept." Later, as she prepared for bed in the small but tidy room, Nora unwound the scarf from her hair. In the mirror above the washbasin, her reflection stared back pale skin, green eyes that had once sparkled with youth, and hair that had turned completely gray by her 32nd birthday. The influenza that took her family had left her physically unharmed, but changed nonetheless, as though her body had decided to mark the passage of grief in strands of silver. She brushed it out, the long tresses falling past her shoulders. In the privacy of her own cabin, she often left it uncovered, but among others, the scarf was her shield. People treated young widows differently than old ones, and the gray made her seem older, more fragile. Nora Redmond was many things, but fragile was not one of them. A knock at the door startled her. She hastily rewrapped her scarf before answering. Eli stood there, a quilt in his arms. "Nights get cold here, even in April. Thought you might need this." His eyes caught on the edge of her scarf where a strand of silver hair had escaped. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. "Thank you," she said, taking the quilt and stepping back slightly. "Good night, Mrs. Redmond." "Nora," she corrected, surprising herself. "Good night, Eli." The following morning dawned clear and bright. Nora found Eli in the barn, already saddling her horse and loading her wagon. "You didn't have to do that," she said, approaching. He turned, smiling. "Early riser myself. Figured I'd save you some time." Nora noticed he'd filled her canteen and added a small sack of provisions to her supplies. The gesture touched her more than she wanted to admit. "My foreman's already feeling better, thanks to your remedy," Eli said, securing the last strap. "Got me thinking there's a sickness going around the Wilcox farm, couple miles east. Fever rash, might be scarlet fever. They could use someone with your knowledge." Nora considered this. "I could stop there on my way back." "I'd be happy to ride with you," Eli offered. "Just to make introductions. Wilcox can be a bit prickly with strangers." She should have refused. Her normal route would take her west, not east. But something about Eli Xavier's company felt comfortable. It had been years since she'd felt that way around anyone. "All right," she agreed, "but just to make introductions." The Wilcox farm was in a state of quiet crisis when they arrived. 3 of the 5 children were ill, confined to beds in the family's small cabin. Mrs. Wilcox, a thin woman with exhausted eyes, nearly wept when Eli explained Nora's abilities. "The doctor from town won't come," she explained. "Says we're too far out and he's too busy with the mining accidents." Nora examined each child carefully. Not scarlet fever, she determined, but a severe case of measles. She sent Mr. Wilcox to gather specific plants while she prepared cool compresses and a tea to reduce the fevers. Eli stayed, helping to fetch water and keeping the healthy children occupied outside. Through the window, Nora could see him teaching the oldest boy how to throw a lasso, his patience evident even from a distance. By late afternoon, the children's fevers had broken, and Nora had left detailed instructions with Mrs. Wilcox. The woman pressed payment into her hands: eggs, fresh butter, and a jar of preserved peaches despite Nora's protests. "You're an angel," Mrs. Wilcox insisted. "Both of you." As they rode away, Eli glanced at Nora. "You have a gift," she shook her head. "Just knowledge passed down, anyone could learn it. But not everyone would use it to help others." He guided his horse closer to her wagon. "You know, there are plenty of folks around here who could use your skills. Nearest doctor's in Colorado Springs, and he doesn't come out this way often." "Are you suggesting I become the local healer?" Nora asked, amused. "Why not? You'd be doing good work, important work." He hesitated. "And you wouldn't be so alone." The words struck a chord. Nora had grown accustomed to solitude, had even convinced herself she preferred it. But these past 2 days with Eli, with human connection, it reminded her of what she'd been missing. "I have my homestead to consider," she said finally. "Of course." Eli tipped his hat. "Just a thought." They reached a fork in the road where Nora would turn west toward her cabin and Eli would return to his ranch. "Thank you for your hospitality," Nora said formally. Eli studied her, his expression unreadable. "Would it be forward of me to call on you sometime? Perhaps bring some of Carmen's stew?" The question caught her off guard. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I enjoy your company, Nora Redmond." His voice was steady, honest. "And I think you might enjoy mine if you gave it a chance." She couldn't remember the last time someone had sought out her company simply for the pleasure of it. Yes, that would be acceptable. His smile was worth the momentary vulnerability she felt. I'll see you soon, then. Nora watched him ride away, a strange lightness in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. True to his word, Eli arrived at her homestead 3 days later, saddlebags loaded with Carmen's stew and fresh bread. Nora had spent the morning nervously tidying her small cabin, wondering what had possessed her to accept his visit. Her cabin was simple but comfortable, one main room with a stone fireplace, a curtained-off sleeping area, and shelves lined with jars of dried herbs and remedies. Outside, her garden was beginning to show the first spring shoots, and chickens pecked contentedly in their yard. "You've made a real home here," Eli remarked, looking around appreciatively. "Thomas, my husband, he had big plans for this place," Nora said, setting plates on the table. "Wanted to expand, raise cattle eventually. And now," she paused, "now I just try to keep what we started." They ate at her small table, the conversation flowing more easily than Nora had expected. Eli told her about his journey west from Boston 15 years earlier, how he'd worked as a ranch hand until he saved enough to buy his own land. "Never expected to stay," he admitted. "Thought I'd make my fortune and go back east, but this place gets in your blood." "I know what you mean," Nora said softly. "I miss Pennsylvania sometimes, but I can't imagine leaving here now." After dinner, they sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains purple and gold. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the evening birdsong. "May I ask you something personal?" Eli said finally. Nora tensed slightly but nodded. "Your hair, why do you hide it?" Her hand went instinctively to her scarf. It turned gray after my family died. I was only 31. May I see it?" His voice was gentle, curious without being invasive. No one had asked this of her before. Slowly, hesitantly, Nora unwound the scarf, letting her silver hair fall loose around her shoulders. Eli's expression softened. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "It shines like silver in the sunset." Nora felt her cheeks warm. Most people find it unsettling, a young woman with an old woman's hair. Most people are fools. He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched a strand that had fallen across her cheek. "It suits you. It's unique like you." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of the possibility that existed in the space between two lonely people. Eli began visiting regularly, sometimes bringing supplies or books from Colorado Springs, other times simply offering his company and strong hands for the heavier work around her homestead. They fell into an easy rhythm, and Nora found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. Spring turned to summer, and Nora's reputation as a healer spread throughout the surrounding homesteads. Eli often accompanied her on her rounds, introducing her to families in need and ensuring her safety on the longer journeys. One sweltering July afternoon, they returned to her cabin after tending to a difficult birth at the Peterson farm. Both were exhausted, covered in dust from the trail. "That woman owes you her life," Eli said as he helped Nora down from her wagon. "And her babies." "I just did what needed doing," Nora replied, though pride warmed her chest. The birth had been complicated, the baby breech, but her grandmother's teachings had guided her hands. Inside, she poured water into her washbasin, offering Eli a clean cloth. As he washed his face and hands, she noticed a deep gash on his forearm. "What happened?" she asked, taking his arm to examine the wound. "Must have caught it on the fence when I was helping Peterson with that mare." "It's nothing." "It needs cleaning," Nora insisted, already gathering her supplies. Eli sat patiently as she washed the cut, applied a salve of calendula and comfrey, and wrapped it with a clean bandage. Her fingers worked efficiently, but she was acutely aware of his proximity, of the warmth of his skin beneath her touch. "You should stay," she said impulsively as she tied off the bandage. "It's late, and the trail back to your ranch is rough in the dark." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. "Are you sure?" he asked. Nora nodded. I'll make up a bed for you by the fire." That night, as Nora lay in her curtained sleeping area, she could hear Eli's steady breathing from across the room. His presence filled the small cabin, making it feel more like a home than it had in years. She fell asleep with a sense of contentment she'd almost forgotten existed. Morning brought clarity and a touch of awkwardness. They moved around each other carefully, Nora preparing breakfast while Eli fetched water from the well. "I've been thinking," Eli said as they ate. "The Johnsons are selling their land adjacent to yours, 40 acres with good water access." Nora looked up, surprised. "I couldn't afford more land." "What if we could, together?" She set down her coffee cup. "What are you suggesting?" Eli took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting a partnership, Nora, your homestead and mine joined, your healing work and my ranching." He met her eyes steadily. "I'm suggesting marriage if you'd consider it." The word hung in the air between them. Marriage. It seemed impossible that she would ever consider such a thing again, and yet, "Eli, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "It's sudden, I know, but these past months getting to know you. I haven't felt this way about anyone before. You're strong, kind, intelligent, and I think we could build something good together." Nora stood, moving to the window to gather her thoughts. Outside, her small garden flourished, the result of careful tending, like any relationship would need. "I loved my husband," she said finally, "very much." "I would never ask you to forget him," Eli replied. "He's part of who you are." She turned to face him. "I'm not the same woman I was when I married Thomas. I'm harder now, more cautious. I don't want who you were, I want who you are." He stood, approaching her slowly. The woman who rides for miles to help strangers, who knows the name of every plant in these hills, who faced tragedy and didn't break. His hand gently touched her cheek. The woman with hair like silver, tears pricked at Nora's eyes. "I need time to think." "Take all the time you need." He kissed her forehead gently. "I'll be waiting." After Eli left, Nora walked her property line, thinking. Marriage to Eli would change everything: her independence, her solitude, the life she'd carefully reconstructed from the ruins of her grief. But it would also bring companionship, security, and perhaps even joy. That evening she removed the scarf from her hair and studied her reflection. The gray had not diminished her, it had transformed her. Perhaps change wasn't something to fear. The following week brought thunderstorms that swelled the creek bordering Nora's property. She watched anxiously as the water rose, threatening her garden and chicken coop. By nightfall, the rain hadn't let up, and she worked frantically to move her chickens to higher ground and fortify the garden fence with sandbags. Suddenly, through the downpour, she heard hoofbeats. Eli appeared, rain-soaked and determined, leading a second horse laden with supplies. "What are you doing here?" She called over the storm, "Figured you might need help." He shouted back, dismounting. Creeks rising fast, together they worked through the night, digging drainage ditches and moving what they could to safety. When the rain finally stopped near dawn, they stood muddy and exhausted but triumphant. The creek had crested just inches from the cabin, but their efforts had prevented serious damage. Inside, Nora built up the fire while Eli wrapped himself in a blanket, his clothes soaked through. "You rode 5 miles in that storm," she said, handing him a cup of hot coffee. "For chickens and a vegetable garden," Eli smiled tiredly. "For you, Nora, I rode for you." In that moment she knew. "Yes," she said quietly. He looked up, confusion crossing his features. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." The words felt right as she spoke them. "If the offer still stands," Eli set down his coffee cup and crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "It stands, it will always stand." "I can't promise to be easy to live with," she warned. "I'm set in my ways. And I can't promise I won't track mud into the house or forget to mend fences sometimes." His smile deepened the creases around his eyes. "But I can promise to love you, respect you, and stand beside you through whatever comes." Nora reached up and touched his face, allowing herself to feel the full measure of what had grown between them. "I think I could love you, Eli Xavier. I think perhaps I already do." Their wedding took place in late August, a simple ceremony in the meadow between their two properties. Neighbors from miles around attended, bringing food and good wishes. Nora wore a new dress of deep blue, and for the first time in 3 years, she left her hair uncovered, the silver strands caught up in a simple knot adorned with wildflowers. Eli's eyes shone when he saw her. "The most beautiful bride in Colorado territory," he whispered as she joined him before the traveling preacher. Life as Mrs. Xavier was an adjustment. Nora maintained her healing work, but now she had Eli's ranch as her base, with proper rooms for seeing patients and preparing remedies. They split their time between his ranch house and her cabin, eventually connecting the two properties with a well-traveled path. By Christmas, they had purchased the Johnson land, expanding their holdings. Eli's cattle thrived, and Nora's medicinal garden grew, supplying remedies to folks as far away as Denver. They worked side by side, complementing each other's strengths. "I've been thinking," Nora said one evening as they sat by the fire. Snow fell gently outside, blanketing the landscape in white. "About starting a proper clinic, a place where people could come for treatment, maybe even stay if they needed nursing." Eli considered this, nodding slowly. "The old Miller place might work. It's got that big front room and several bedrooms. You think we could manage it?" "Along with everything else. Together, I think we could manage just about anything." He reached for her hand. "You were born to heal, Nora. I've seen how it fulfills you." She leaned against his shoulder, grateful for his understanding. "And the ranch, your dreams." "My dreams have expanded," he said simply, "to include yours." Spring brought new beginnings. The clinic took shape in the renovated Miller house, centrally located to serve the surrounding homesteads. Nora trained 2 local girls in basic nursing and herbal preparations, extending her reach. And on a warm May morning, as dawn broke over the eastern hills, she placed Eli's hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered, joy breaking across his face like sunrise. Nora nodded, her own heart full. "By winter, if all goes well." He gathered her close, his hand cradling the back of her head where silver strands had come loose from her braid. "Our family," he murmured against her hair. "Our future." That evening, they sat on the porch of what was now truly their home, watching the sunset paint the landscape in familiar golds and purples. Eli's arm was warm around her shoulders, and the promise of new life nestled within her. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Saying yes to me, to all of this?" Nora looked up at him, at the face that had become as dear to her as her own reflection. "Not for a single moment," she replied truthfully. "You gave me back something I thought was lost forever." "Your smile," he suggested with a grin. "My heart," she corrected, leaning up to kiss him softly. "And the courage to use it again." As twilight deepened around them, Nora Redmond Xavier let her silver hair catch the last light of day, no longer a mark of sorrow but a badge of survival, of renewal, of love found when least expected. Like the land around them, resilient, wild, and beautiful, they had weathered storms and emerged stronger, ready to face whatever the frontier might bring together. Their daughter was born that December, with eyes like her father's and a determination like her mother's. They named her Hope, for what had sustained them, and for what they saw in her future. And as years passed, as the clinic flourished and the ranch prospered, as more children joined their family, Nora's silver hair became a beacon in the community, a symbol of the healer who had once hidden her grief beneath a scarf, until a cowboy with kind eyes had seen its beauty, and in seeing, had helped her find her way back to joy.